In Nairobi, when it rains, the entire city is turned into one large swimming pool. There is water everywhere, and this just goes to show that whatever we have is not serving us. It is the concrete has replaced all the pervious layers. The stormwater drainages are not sufficient, and when they are sufficient, they are covered with dirt and waste from wherever, which of course is going to warrant that there's going to be repairs, which also cost a lot of money when literally we could have built a good situation to begin with. So all of this and many other effects lead to, of course, economic losses, which are direct impacts.
Question is not how fast we are building, it is what kind of future we are looking into. You understand? So because infrastructure is more than concrete and steel, it is a promise of opportunity, of safety, of dignity, and of inclusion. And if we get it wrong, that promise cracks long before the roads do. A green Africa is one that grows without destroying its tomorrow. A resilient Africa is one that can stand firm when floods rise, heat intensifies, or economies shake. And an inclusive Africa is one where infrastructure does not choose winners and losers, where progress reaches cities and villages, women and men, young people, and the most vulnerable. My name is Omevi Idolo, and this is Just Africa, the Friday edition. You can see we are super excited. And you know, I am not doing this alone. I have my main G, my favorite person, Emmanuel Amule.
Oh my God! You just rolled the red carpet. That was nice. Even though we are both wearing blue today, two different shades of blue. Okay, roll out the blue carpet.
Yeah.
What a way to start the weekend.
Yes.
And this conversation is very, very interesting. When I had the conversations with each of the guests offline, I knew, okay. Lots of Africans need to hear this.
Yeah.
Particularly here in Nigeria, as we start to relate to climate, or talking climate change. This kind of conversation that has to do with someone who has done civil engineering at the same time is now advocating for green energy, anything green. Okay, cool. Let's see how we can do that. Because look, right now, we don't understand the kind of heat that we're expecting this year, right? So we have to start to prepare for it. If some of the infrastructure that we're going to be getting or buildings we're going to be getting will begin to infuse some of these new ideas that she has pioneered, I mean, it will be great for many more of us to begin to listen to this kind of
Talking
things.
about heat, I have not felt the kind of heat I felt, was it 3 days ago? I have not felt it for a very long time.
Did you go close to hellfire?
No, I wish I did, but I didn't. I was like the sweat was just dropping. I'm like, what's going on? Throughout the night, I couldn't sleep. You know that situation where you have to leave your soft bed and be on towel.
Oh, yeah.
That was how I
Remember we had Busari, who was also talking about how we could, the heat is making us have less sleep.
Exactly. That was exactly what happened to me.
The climate change is now letting us, it's not affecting our sleep. We're not having less sleep. And the idea is having green technology, whatever it is, even if it's to build the roof or to build the walls, whatever it is that can absorb the heat. Because look, we can't suffer outside and be inside and still suffer again. That's double suffer.
Exactly. So we really have to. I think this conversation is very important. So this is the moment of decision. Do we build for speed or do we build for strength? Do we chase short-term gains or long-term value? Today, we are not just talking about infrastructure. We are talking about the future. Africa is designing brick by brick, policy by policy, and choice by choice. Our guest, Laura Kasuni from Kenya, is a civil engineer whose work spans mega infrastructure projects in Nairobi, rural roads development, green building practice, and climate adaptation research. As a MasterCard Foundation scholar and MPhil candidate in engineering for sustainable development at the University of Cambridge. And through her work with UN Habitat, she brings both field experience and advanced research on resilience, climate risk, and socio-demographic vulnerability. Her perspective bridges engineering practice, policy, and development planning. Hello and welcome to Just Africa. Laura, I skipped one of your names, and I believe that you noticed that because I'm keeping my tongue intact. Can you pronounce that name?
It's Wathe. So the Wathe, that's Wathe. That's how we pronounce it here in Kenya.
Oh.
But I know the other people might struggle to pronounce it, which is okay.
So the name is Wathe.
Wathe, yes.
Yes, what does that mean? What does Wathe mean?
So Wathe is my father's name. And it means a naughty child. So I think someone in the family was very mischievous. And I forgot that name. But personally, I'm a very good girl.
Yeah, of course, you look it. Okay, so let's go into the conversation. When we talk about green resilience and inclusive infrastructure, what does that actually change compared to how Africa has traditionally built?
Okay, let me see where to begin. When it comes to, maybe I'll give some definitions for the people, maybe for the lay people who don't understand. I'll start with maybe infrastructure development, because we're going to talk about that a lot within this hour. So that, according to a definition I got on the internet, is the systematic improvement and expansion of essential services and facilities with the aim of enhancing economic and social conditions. So these facilities and services could be transportation, energy, water, health, housing, and most of the time we look at it in terms of the dimensions of quantity, quality, and access. So going forward, maybe as I speak on the infrastructure, maybe that is going to be a good framework to look at what I'm talking about. So when it comes to traditionally, as engineers and as urban planners, architects, and all of us in the industry, our approaches have been focused on more concrete channels to maybe, how do I put it? Infrastructure has looked at historical norms, let me say that. So looking at the building codes, the infrastructure codes, we are looking at the history to design what we have today. But going forward, looking at maybe resilient infrastructure, it means looking more on the future conditions as opposed to the past. So according to this means that the temperatures are going to be increasing. As you said, you're experiencing extreme heat in Lagos and Nigeria, just like in Kenya and probably everywhere else in the country. Floods are increasing. So whatever we have been doing in the past clearly is not sufficing, and we need to look at perhaps create models for what is going to happen in the future and use this to do our designs to ensure that in 100 years, in maybe 50 to 100 years, this infrastructure is still existent and is able to withstand whatever conditions come after that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Hi, Laura, once again. When you worked with the UN Habitat, right, what were you guys looking out for in your research?
Okay, I'm very, very new to this, more of the high-level policy and planning that I do with UN Habitat. Previously, my whole career, which has spanned about 4 years after my undergraduate, was more on the ground implementation of projects and programs. So this looks like implementation of roads, the road construction, the basic services, whether it's water, the housing. I was the one on the ground, on-site engineer. So I was dealing with the day-to-day activities. However, when I was experiencing many challenges, and I realized that these were just downstream syndromes to perhaps more upstream challenges, which come from the planning stages, the concepts, when these projects are being formulated. And therefore, I wanted a seat on the table so that I can be able to influence more of these decisions. Hence, of course, my transition period, and now I'm at UN Habitat, and I'm doing program support, but I'll give maybe a general overview of what the organization does, and I'm not speaking for them by any means. I work for the West African office, and here we come up with programs and projects that ensure that our focus, which is housing, basic services, and land, is inclusive, it's resilient, it is green, it is sustainable, and everyone has access to it. So this looks like coming up with policies, programs within the region that just ensure that these three things, housing, basic services, and land, are accessible to the entire community or countries in general. So it's more of a high level planning situation, which you can then cascade to the countries and the municipalities and local communities, and then they can go on to implement them as I was implementing before. Basically.
Okay. So you're a civil engineer, right? And now you're doing conversations around climate and habitat. How do you marry both?
Yeah, great question. So as I was practicing within the civil engineering space or construction, let me just call it construction industry, I was very keen to marry other. I was very interested in more interdisciplinary types of situations. I was interested in the health and safety of the site. Where does the waste go when we are producing large amounts of waste within the site? More of the planning. How did this project come into play? Who decided that this was the best project to have here? And therefore, while I was searching for programs to do, this one in particular, the Engineering for Sustainable Development, really spoke to me because it was dealing with exactly that. I think that's exactly the pitch that they had on their side, that, okay, we are marrying engineering with people, policy, and society, and you can see how to better engage with these topics as you're designing for projects and programs. And therefore, after the program and during the program is when you realize how interrelated everything is. Infrastructure is not just a standalone system. It's not just a road. It's not just a house. There are so many things that go into it. And with the accelerating impacts of climate change, the flooding in Nairobi, it's always flooding when it rains. And this impacts the infrastructure in a big way all the time. And therefore, I really wanted to see, okay, is there a way I can deal with the root causes of these issues? And so when you look at it, with the big picture, they are all very, very related. And one thing definitely leads to the other.
All right, thank you very much, Laura. Now, I want to ask, how would you describe the current climate change? I know it's global right now, but in Africa, how would you describe the change we are experiencing right now?
Yeah, it's definitely a global phenomena. Africa, we are unfortunate that we contribute very little to in terms of greenhouse emissions and waste and all these things. But we, because of our coping and adaptive capacity, we struggle to deal with the effects of climate change once they do happen. So unfortunately, we are bearing a lot of the brunt of this climate change impacts that they always just talk about in research papers and scientific articles, but literally on the ground, we can feel the effects. As you mentioned, it is extremely hot, hotter than it has been in previous years. And that's not just something that they give from the local meteorological sites where they're like, okay, temperatures have increased. You personally can feel the heat. Mm-hmm. When it rains, probably it's flooding a bit more. So meaning the amount of rainfall that is coming or that we are experiencing is much higher than the one that we're used to. coastal cities, I know around West Africa, coastal, there's a lot of sea level rise. So coastal cities are really experiencing a lot of the effects of climate change, where the sea is rising, people are being displaced. And just back home here in Nakuru, Naivasha, around that area, many of the lakes have been rising in level, leading to the displacement of very, very many people. And these are effects that are trickling down to the common wananchi, as you call them here. That means the regular person that we can see, but maybe the regular person cannot attribute it to climate change, unfortunately. But it is definitely an effect and an impact from that.
As a civil engineer, do you think that the kind of houses we are building right now, do you think they are strong enough, or do you think they'll be able to withstand the kind of climate change that we are experiencing right now?
Difficult question to respond to, but I will just give a blanket response of no. In Africa, I think we are okay, we didn't say privileged, but our infrastructure has lagged a little behind. We are very, very far behind compared to maybe London or the other developed cities, where most of the building stock that they have is what they will have 50, 60, 100 years from now. They're not doing many new builds, as opposed to Africa, where a lot of new infrastructure is still being carried out. And this infrastructure, the houses, let me use that because that's what you asked, are using the building codes that were developed hundreds, if maybe tens of years ago, which, to be honest, could have been obsolete. And as a matter of fact, there's been a lot of talk on greening the codes, and greening is just a regular word, but improving the building codes to ensure that they reflect the realities of now and whatever is happening in the future. And so the houses that we have perhaps might not be able to withstand the extreme heat that we are definitely going to experience. And this is something that needs to be dealt with immediately by the powers that be. The flooding, whatever the impacts that are going to be experienced, I personally do not believe that whatever we have is going to be sufficient. But the good thing is we have the opportunity to have this step change, because we still have a lot of infrastructure to build as a continent. We are able to incorporate these resilience standards and sustainability standards and green standards from the beginning, before we even design the projects themselves, and hence ensure that, okay, now they're going to be able to house us safely through the storms, literally and figuratively.
All right. Okay, so Laura, what are some of the challenges we are likely going to face if we do not put those standards into consideration when we are building, whether it's the road, whether it's the houses, whatever it is? If we do not put these standards into place, what are some of the challenges?
Okay, maybe I'll give an example of transport, because that's my sector, and Nairobi, because that's my home. In Nairobi, when it rains, the entire city is turned into one large swimming pool. So there's water everywhere, it's flooded, and this just goes to show that whatever we have is not serving us. It is the concrete has replaced all the pervious layers. The stormwater drainages are not sufficient, and when they are sufficient, they are covered with dirt and waste from wherever. And therefore, the effects are felt by everyone. Houses are flooding. People are displaced from their homes. We've built on riparian land, hence whenever it rains, not even extreme rainfall, people are being displaced, houses are filled with water. So given that example, let's say it has rained, there's a flood, the road is impassable. already that has affected maybe the school-going kids. They're not going to school on that day. They're not going to school probably on that week. It has affected perhaps the people who are going to go to work. This has lost productive hours that could otherwise have contributed to the overall economic development of the country. The infrastructure itself has been damaged, which of course is going to warrant that there's going to be repairs, which also cost a lot of money when literally we could have built a good situation to begin with. So all of this and many other effects lead to, of course, economic losses, which are direct impacts, but also the indirect impacts, which could be felt by the people for sure, which could be mental health crisis, loss of income, just the usual things that you would attribute to perhaps an environmental risk occurring. So yeah, so the individual loses, the community loses, the municipality loses, the country as a whole is struggling because of this situation.
Because I think one of the questions would have been, so who suffers when these things are not available? So somehow you've already answered it. Okay, but again, in lay terms, right? Because when we hear green infrastructure, in fact, at one point I first heard that, I thought you meant to be going back to the times when we were using plants for our roofs. You understand? Or just having plants around our walls. But when you're talking green infrastructure from your own perspective, what do you mean? So I explain it to the common person. Green infrastructure. Are we going to be planting more trees, or are we going to be having roads with plants on it? Explain.
Yeah, that's part of it. When you hear green, of course, you think green, a tree, vegetation, perhaps, which is essentially a part of it. But also, a lot of it has been shaped through a Western lens, where they have like solar panels and green roofs, and some of them might be practical to be cascaded down to Africa, others might not. And so, maybe in practical terms, this could mean infrastructure that works in tandem or collaboratively with natural systems rather than against them. So I've given the example of Nairobi's drainage challenges. So maybe a traditional engineering approach would be like, okay, let's do more drainages and let's use lots of concrete to create these drainages so that the water, when it comes, it's just going to fall into the drainages and be led away into the, I don't know, Nairobi River or something. However, we can see that this solution hasn't worked in the past and is probably not going to work. And so this means like maybe green infrastructure in this sense would be perhaps this popular term that they really like to use in the UK, the sustainable drainage systems, where you have, as you've said, maybe doing some vegetations along the road, where to ensure that there's more permeable spaces, basically, where water can seep in once it rains. So you see now the road is a lot of concrete where there's no water that is passing through. But now bioswales, permeable surfaces, restored wetlands as we have built along the riparian lands, those people need to be relocated further back to ensure that the rivers are actually allowed to drain water correctly. And of course, planting trees. And also the good thing about this, they have the benefit of providing co-benefits basically, such as improved air quality from the trees and the vegetation, urban cooling, which is a huge issue. Heat is a massive issue in our continent, and then also creating community green spaces. So I would say maybe green resilience, maybe if you just look at it as this infrastructure is going to work together with the natural systems, then it can be anything that you want it to be.
All right. Are there ways where some of these things are communicated to African leaders? Because I know we have so many meetings, we have so many books written, but somehow we're still seeing the prevalence of what we should not be doing, especially in urban cities. How do we get them to now listen?
Interesting question, because I don't know in your question whether it's the I don't know if it's the blame or the onus. I don't know if the onus is on the public, on the policymakers, on the planners, on the technical experts, the engineers, and anyone. I don't know who the onus you're placing it on, but I do believe it belongs to all of us. I know that sounds like cope. However, definitely the policies and the government has a huge role to play, unfortunately. Coming with maybe policy shifts that ensure that, okay, we're doing risk assessments for all infrastructure projects and trying to project, okay, should something occur, should a risk occur, how will this infrastructure fare in such an environment? So when it comes to planning and policy, the government has its part to play. The technical experts, I'll call them that, the engineers, the architects, the people who are in the built environment, they have a huge role to play, of course, by familiarizing themselves with whatever sustainability resilience means within their context, wherever they are, how they can incorporate this into their designs and into their practice and into whatever they're doing in the built environment, as well as the community for sure has a part to play in being able to recognize, okay, what exactly it is I can do as an individual to affect perhaps the entirety of the community. Maybe I'll say that.
You were talking about the green structure in Kenya. Now, most times, just as our Emmanuel said, most times when we talk about green infrastructure and all that, our attention is focused in the urban area. We don't talk about the rural areas because we believe that they have the natural ones. They have the trees and everything. But sometimes we forget that not everyone in the urban areas can actually afford the green infrastructures we're talking about. So how affordable are these green infrastructure in Kenya?
The green infrastructure, I don't know if I can put it upon individuals mostly. I mean, you can have a green roof in your house, but how much is that going to affect the entirety of the flooding within the area? Then I'm going to go back to the question or maybe the comment that you made about the focus on urban areas. I'm going to maybe not defend it, but preface it with the fact that a lot of the focus has been on urban areas because a good percentage of the population right now in Africa lives in urban centers.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be about up to 70% in 2050. So urban centers and urban areas are going to be packed with people. And already there's the infrastructure gap is so large. And I think that's why maybe most of the time the international players, the local players identify how much it's going to be a crisis if it is not already. And therefore the focus becomes mostly on the urban areas. But you've rightly pointed out, for sure, even in the rural areas, there is work that needs to be done. And sometimes maybe not correctly or correctly, people in the rural areas perhaps do not have enough I won't say finances, maybe adaptive capacity to deal with maybe like in the country, a lot of the landslides, mudslides, lots of flooding happens in rural areas, and many of these people are displaced once that happens. So, of course, that can be looked at the moment, but also I'm not an expert in that, so I would comment on that. On the green infrastructure and affordability.
It's expensive. There's no, I mean, there's no about it. It is expensive.
Sometimes it could be difficult, you understand?
No, and I don't want to give misleading information.
We are trying to give the right information, which is very important. Now, since we'll be talking about green infrastructure, we'll be preaching it, we'll be talking about clean energy, we'll be talking about building good houses. we have been preaching these messages to many people in the urban area again. But when people go for tree felling, we go to the rural area. We go to the rural areas. How much information do we give out to the people in that area to preach against tree falling, cutting down trees, and everything that will make even that area to become hot, like the urban areas? How much of this knowledge do the people in the rural areas have about green energy?
That's a great point. Personally, in my country and in my community, I come from a community called Kamba. And in our area, my rural area, that is exactly the problem that we have run into. There was rampant cutting down of trees for fuel, of course, spanning the 90s, 80s, 2000s, and we've cut down the trees. And we just thought we were collecting firewood to cook, because which alternative do we have? But now, historically, the place is just known as this dry place that barely ever gets rainfall, and literally that's what we're known for. But you see, also, as I said before, it's difficult for the common layman, as you've said, to relate, to see the correlation between the dry seasons that we're experiencing at the moment with the firewood I used to cook 2 years ago. So I agree that the local person, the rural person, any person, even people in urban areas, needs better access to information, to education. I believe it should also even be in the curriculum, the educational curriculum, that causes have effects, or the other way around, effects have causes, that one. And even being privy to some of these causes and effects. To what extent, I'm not sure how much of it is required to be useful. And even if the people receive the information, will they be able to follow through with it? Because, fine, you can tell someone, don't cut down this tree, but then also, what are they going to use for cooking? So I think information has to be accompanied by also alternative sources of whatever it is that you're asking them not to use.
Yes.
Whether it's clean sources of fuel, whether it's electricity connection. Yes, but you just can't ask someone, don't do this, don't build on riparian land, when people have no access to any other pieces of land. So at the end of the day, all of these things need to be looked at in a holistic view, and not just in a way that is going to punish these people who perhaps this is all they have to use at the end of the day.
How often do they carry out those policies? For instance, a building must be built in a certain standard, and if the building infrastructure does not meet the standard, how often do they prosecute such company for not working up to standard?
The answer lies within the question: barely ever. And this is something that is consistent within Kenya, within East Africa, within Africa, and even with the research that I did carry out in my master's, it was the same thing there in the Western world. The ratio between, I won't give a false ratio, between the policies that are created and the implementation on the ground is very minimal. There's lack of follow through with the authorities, with the governing bodies. So, for example, Kenya has amazing policies on sustainability, on resilience, on all these things. However, on the ground, none, if very little, is reflected within the realities on the ground. Also, there's an East African Community Climate Responsive Building Guideline, which gives like a regional model of what maybe climate responsive infrastructure should look like. However, enforcement is very weak, barely anything has been done. So unfortunately, that is where I put the challenge to the policymakers and also us as the electorate, I'll call us that, to put pressure on our elected officials to follow through with whatever it is that they come up with, if they do come up with them in the first place, so that we don't have just policies sitting on gazettements and papers somewhere and not reflecting anyway in our lived realities as citizens of the country.
All right, Laura, so I need you to speak to two categories of people, right? I want you to advise Africans on how to prepare themselves for the future in terms of infrastructure. That's on one hand. And of course, I would also like you to speak to civil engineers like yourselves who are already practicing and those young ones who are planning to practice. What they should start to begin to do, or what they should start to do when they are targeting perhaps a future in 10, 20 years, what it should be like in terms of climate resilience infrastructure.
Thank you. That's a great note to end the interview. I think for young Africans like myself who are hopefully, who are optimistic, who are ambitious, and we have great hope and ambitions for the continent and what it has to offer us, I would ask us to stay informed. Go out there, read on news articles, see the correlations. I would ask us to vote wisely, whichever country you are in, and make sure
Vote wisely.
It's very important.
the people that you're voting for. Vote for ideologies, not people or tribes or whatever. Vote for people who you think once they enter the office, they're going to serve your interests, because all these effects, perhaps the politicians have the opportunity to fly away to whichever country, and but as we have our country and we're going to stay here, so we need to vote for people who have our country's best interest at heart. So I think those two things, be informed, both in terms of climate and also civic education, and vote wisely to the common Mwananchi, sorry for using a Swahili term. And for the young African engineers, and especially focusing on sustainability, I'll give 3 pieces of advice. First of all, I would ask you to cultivate interdisciplinary competence. That's the first thing I started with when Emmanuel asked me where I saw the correlation. I think being a good civil engineer, mechanical engineer, whatever, transportation engineer is not enough. You need to understand the correlation with policy, finance, social dynamics and society, as well as in the environment, to ensure that whatever designs you're doing are going to be user-centric and are going to reflect the realities on the ground. Second, I'm going to say center people in your practice. There's a joke or whatever that as engineers we can just see things through a very boxed point of view, but I would ask us to see every design decision as affecting human lives. It's not just a road, it's a road that many people pass through every single day. So visit the communities that your infrastructure is going to serve, understand their realities, and then design with them in mind, not just giving a top-down approach where you're like, this is going to be good for them without consulting them. And then third and lastly, I'm going to say you need to champion evidence-based practice. So demand for data before you're designing all these projects and programs. Ask questions, question assumptions, learn from the failures, because there are lots of failures. Buildings, what are they called? Falling every other day here. And measure outcomes and use these outcomes to inform your future designs to ensure that you are building for the future. So, I think that's a good way to end this.
Honestly, it is. I love what you said. Get data, ask questions. Don't just put something together and assume it suits them. Thank you very much, Laura. But this question is not a woman thing, because I know Emmanuel is not going to like it.
No.
But when people see you as a woman who is into civil engineering, what's the reception like? Do they say, what does this woman know? Do you face those kind of talks?
Yeah, maybe I think previously and even currently, it is a very male-dominated field. And even maybe I'll give the reflection in my undergraduate class, the ratio of men to women was 1 to 5. So there was like 100 men and 20 girls. When I went to practice, that was much, much more evident, where you'd go to site and there's no female
Yeah.
toilets, there's no sanitary
Oh.
facilities. Yes, yes. In this big 2025, or all these other things. But as and even as you climb higher, sorry, that's my cat. As you climb higher within the industry, you will find that there's still not many women. So there is a big gender gap to be closed. But I don't know, my parents were supportive, my family was quite supportive.
Yeah.
And I think even as I'm going, I do have I do mentor younger ladies who want to go into STEM, and I tell them of the realities of things, and I tell them you're as capable as the next person to pursue this career. And yeah, I encourage everyone to do it. As a young woman, go for it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you very much, Laura, for coming on the show today. So you are in Nairobi right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what part of Kenya are you from? This is just Africa.
Yes, I live in Nairobi, born and raised, but I am from the community called Kamba, and where we naturally reside is in the eastern part of Kenya, and it's
Okay.
called Kitui.
Okay. So what do you speak there?
Language.
The language.
Yeah, so I mean, in Kenya we speak English and Kiswahili, so I'm fluent in those, but now I speak Kamba. Kamba is now my native language.
Oh, and we're beautiful. So you're not going to speak English, you're not going to speak Swahili, now you're going to speak Kamba.
I might struggle with that. Maybe Swahili.
No, not Swahili. You said, what did you say?
No,
Is
she
it
says Kamba. She now speaks Kamba.
You said you speak Kamba, so you're going to tell people, you're going to greet people, you're going to greet all Kenyans, those in Nairobi, those everywhere in Kamba, and tell them to keep watching Soak News, to subscribe to Just Africa. She's laughing.
I'll do it in Kiswahili. What I don't speak our language.
All right.
Thank you so much. Asante sana. So, naitwa Laura Kasuni, and na nimetoka unaona hata na struggle kuongea Kiswahili, but naomba mu tune in kusikiza hii show ya Just Africa na Emmanuel, na tuendelee kuendeleza Afrika kama kontinenti yetu. Oh my God, that was horrible.
I think they get it. I think anyone listening will get it.
Yes. So that's a big problem. Thank you, Laura, once again for coming on the show.
You guys are wonderful hosts. Thank you so much for asking me to do this. And thank you for what you're doing. I told Emmanuel, I watch your show. I love the guests you bring. I love the diversity. I was watching the things that you were playing before the show started, and I just love the Africa focus. And let's do it.
Yes, thank you so much.